was thrown out of court because the original attribution went to Xerox PARC and we had licensed it from Xerox PARC, and that's how it became. A long story, see, you didn't ask this, but I'll just tell you this, is over time, Apple and I, we've had a very weird relationship. Once Apple was almost going to go under, and we invested $150 million in Apple at that time, and we had a cross-licensing deal, and all of the cross-licensing deal happened to be GUI or user interfaces. It is almost true that 80% of any user interface in the world today, if you talk about IPS and who owns the technology, are literally owned by two companies, Apple and Microsoft. And interestingly, we are cross-licensed between the two. Almost everybody, almost always violates one of our patents. We choose not to go against them. An example, when Sun sued us, I wanted to go against Sun. Because without checking, I found within like 2 hours, I found they violated 23 of our patents on GUI. Swing, which was the technology of Sun, had violated 23, but without me even doing any big homework. I was convinced if I did homework, they would have violated 80 patents. And so, but Microsoft chose not to do that. They decided that that was not the right thing. So it was originally done by this thing, but today most of the technology and the patents are owned by Microsoft. That won't be true as other companies come into the foray. And there's only so many ways of doing something, right? Whether the pinch and the zoom, or you click a plus and it expands and all of that. Every one of them is owned by the Microsoft or Apple. Yes.
How do you tackle the irrelevant information to the search engines like Google and other? So much of junk material is projected, when we search.
Right.
How do you? Why is it that such a well-informed search engine gives irrelevant information?
Yeah, quite often it is what is called the user intent is very hard to impute or figure out. Is the biggest problem we have. And I'll give you two very simple examples, right? When you type cricket in India, you most probably mean the sport of cricket. When you type cricket in some other part of the world, you might mean the insect. If we give you the insect when you mean the sport, it will look irrelevant to you. In the grand scheme of things, it isn't, right? And there are tons of such examples, right? So quite often the problem is we are not guessing what your user intent is correctly. We are getting better and better at it, both Google and us. Now Google or Bing has to know about it and get it, and now when you go query for it, we have to go show it, right? Basically sifting the corn from the chaff and all of that kind of stuff, picking the right ones is very, very hard for us. Right now our technology, if I would say, is we are not even as smart as a kid who is few minutes old. And we have a long way to go before we become as smart as a kid who is 1 or 2 years old, let alone 10 years old. We are very much in the nascent stages on understanding what users mean and giving them what they want. And quite often, the best answer we can give you is without you surfacing something that you mean to ask, right? That'll be the best thing we can do, and we are very, very far from it. So the reason you see a lot of junk in any engine, including Google, is because we just cannot guess as well what you mean. And the more you refine it, the better we get at it. And the more history we get at it, the better we get at it. That was the question he was asking on data analysis. It's because the more information we have, we get better at it. It's one of the hungry machines. The more information it feeds, it gets better and better and better over time. So,
but search engines like the Science Direct or SciFinder, that also gives junk information.
They suffer from two separate things. The one thing, you would expect things like the science thing to be much better, right? Only because it's a very narrow space and you can get much better at it. But what the people there don't have is, frankly, the technology Google and we have is very hard to replicate and very expensive to replicate. Frankly, where Google is today, there's only one company in the world that can afford to compete against them. That's Microsoft, because we have a big bank account, right? Otherwise, it's because it is ridiculously expensive to develop those technologies and digest that information. So even though those companies have a very narrow space where their technology can do equally well, they just don't have the wherewithal, either in technology or in machines, to do as good a job. So it's quite often possible, though you're searching a technical journal, a technically oriented site should do better, it's possible Google and Bing do equally better or even better than that site, though it still is 50% junk. We'll have 50% good answers, they might have only 20% good answers just because our technology is doing a better job, not that we understand the science any better than they do. So, I know it's a hard answer. Yes?
Particular file types or particular articles in a particular time or something like that. So Bing also, does it have such?
Yeah, so most of the time Google uses various things including what are called regular expressions to refine your search. We allow the same things. Maybe it's just that we are not doing as good a job of publicizing it, but you can do pretty much.
Even Google is not publicizing it as much. Like I think
the reason is you don't want users to go there. Yes, the power users will always go there and find it, but our job is to be able to give you the right answer without you standing on your head, right? Yes.
That's an interesting aspect. Like when I search something in Google with a single word or couple word or 3 words, I got it very fast. Okay, and when I typed 2-3 statements for the same article, I didn't find it in Google. So when the size of the query is increasing, it's very difficult to find in Google. I have tried many times.
Yeah, Google does what is
Are you doing anything on that?
Yeah, Google does what are called instant answers, meaning as you type the first word, they give you a search, and as you type the refinement.
No, the ridiculous thing is that.
I know,
so
I heard
I
what you
just
said.
typed 2-3 words, I found that particular
I get it.
document, but when I typed the whole paragraph or 2-3 statements, it could not find out.
Yeah, I frankly don't
No
know.
records found.
Yeah, I frankly don't know the answer. When you type a long query, it is in search parlance, it's called what is called a tail query. And actually, Google is relatively good at tail queries. So I'm a little surprised that your experience is that in their tail query, they do worse than they do in what is called the head query when you do a few searches. Don't know the answer, but I'm surprised because that's actually Google's forte is tail queries. So. Yes.
why is that?
That's a great question. There are multiple reasons in various countries. The question was about China. China, for those you don't know, Baidu is rules the roost. 2 things happened, which is unfortunate. I mean, basically there are various countries, China being one of them, Korea being other, unfortunately, where the government and the geopolitical forces intervene in a way that is not conducive for certain companies. Frankly, Google was doing very well. Google and Baidu were head to head. And then basically the Chinese government put a lot of restrictions on all companies, not just Google, us, Yahoo. Yahoo made some compromises. Google chose not to make the same compromises, and we chose not to make the same compromises. In our case, it was okay because they were talking about mail, and all of our mail servers were not in China, they were in the US, so they couldn't do anything about it. But in the restrictions they put on Google, Google was not willing to deal with it, so they just walked out of China. When they walked out of China, they basically handed the entire reign over to Baidu. Also, Baidu was doing something that Google was feeling really uncomfortable doing. Baidu was not only allowing you to search for illegal music, meaning not copyrighted music, but also for you to be able to download the equivalent of BitTorrent and stuff like that. Google chose not to go there for ethical reasons. And so both of that combination and then ultimately fighting with the Chinese government and getting kicked out of China made it harder for them to penetrate. So they were actually doing well in China, and then they walked out. Interestingly, that particular sequence is an opportunity right now for Bing in China to at least compete against Google as number 2 with Baidu as opposed to number 2 as Google. But that's a different story for a different day. So. Yes?
The question is, why is Microsoft pushing so hard for search when from what I have read that it's consistently losing money?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Other thing is, where does search fit in Microsoft overall scheme of things?
Yeah. See, the good point. The way it works is, I'll use a couple of economics terminology, and if it washes over, it's okay. Search is a very interesting industry in a lot of ways. It's what is called a winner-take-all industry in economics parlance. Most of the other industries, if you take car or something, settles on about 3, there's always 3 big guys, right? Search is one of those, the bigger you get, the better you get. and it's much, much costlier for the next guy to get in. So that's the way search is. But what is interesting for search, and I'll give you two simple stats why Microsoft is in this space. One, we cannot afford to have Google run away with that for various reasons, because it's an important area for us where we have to compete with them. Secondly, it's actually a lucrative business. We started, and I'll give you some numbers. There's something called RPM, the revenue for every 1,000 searches, right? Google's somewhere in the $60 to $80 range today. So they make more money than their market share, if you will. They make about 80% of the revenue in search. We were about a year ago at about $20 or whatever it is. We are today at $40, right? When we cross a magical $50 or $55, we become profitable. When we even get close to the low end of Google, we become incredibly profitable in search. So search is a good business for us to be in. Right now, we just are not at a point where we are as good as getting the money, because for the merchant to give us money, there's got to be enough users. That cycle is just kickstarting that cycle in the US. And we are almost there. The fact that we've doubled our revenue in 18 months implies that we are on the right path, if you will. So that's one reason we are in. Secondly, we believe ultimately, and I don't know, the time will tell, search in its current form where you're sitting and typing in a box is not sure whether it makes sense long term. Whether we are right or Google's right, we'll find out. For right now, we are competing there, but we believe that there's going to be a lot more innovations in search, and we have as good a shot at making that happen as Google does. And Google does, it's not like Google is stupid. Google also believes that that could happen, and they are investing as well. Now, let's see who's right and who's wrong and all of that stuff, right? So, but yeah, but it makes all the sense for Microsoft to be in that business, because it is, once we cross a threshold, it's going to be a lucrative business. And the problem with Microsoft is anything that generates millions of dollars of profit is not interesting for us. We have to generate profits in the billions range, right? And search is one of the very few places where we can generate billions of dollars of revenue. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We have a small moment. Swami.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thanks.